Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Destination LoRaWAN webcast series hosted by the LoRa Alliance. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a few moments here. It looks like we still have some attendees connecting, so we will begin more momentarily with a short introduction. All righty. Hi, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you again for joining today's Destination LoRaWAN webcast. We will be talking about best practices for scaling LoRaWAN solutions and have a great panel discussion in store for you today. Now, before we get started, there are a few housekeeping notes to share with you. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a bar of application engagement tools to help guide your experience. You can also move around and resize the different tools on the screen as you need. If you do notice the slides or the video is behind, pressing F5 on your computer will refresh your screen and help catch you up. Most importantly, you can see the Q&A box below the presentation screen. We are going to have a live Q&A session at the end of today's webcast, so please be submitting your questions in that box throughout the webcast for the panelists. Lastly, an on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 48 hours. You will also notice a resources list on your screen. Here you can find more information about the LoRa Alliance and the many benefits of being a member. A special thank you to one of our LoRa Alliance members, MachineQ, a Comcast company, for being today's webcast sponsor and also the Destination LoRaWAN series Gold sponsor. MachineQ really helped drive and lead today's webcast and pulled together a great panel for you. So it's my pleasure to now hand it over to today's moderator, John Brzozowski. Go ahead and take it away, John.
Thank you very much, folks. Megan, the Alliance, we're honored to be here with this esteemed panel. We cannot thank you enough for this opportunity to kind of share, a very important story for scale and performance as far as bringing the realities of IoT to our ecosystem. I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce our distinguished panel here. John Horn, President and Chief Strategy Officer from CoreKinect, followed by Michael Putterman, Head of Product and Operations for MachineQ, a Comcast company, and Tom Patton, Principal Program Manager from Microsoft Azure IoT. Cannot thank these folks enough for their willingness, time, and energy spent to kind of tell their stories from three very different perspectives as far as kind of making the dreams of IoT a reality. With that, we'll go ahead and dive right in with Mr. John Horn. John, would you mind kind of giving us a little bit of background around your story, CoreKinect, and the value that you're bringing to your customers, using the power of IoT?
Thanks, John. I appreciate it, and appreciate you asking me to be part of this panel. We're excited to work with MachineQ and everything that we're doing together with LoRaWAN technologies. So what CoreKinect does is we're a hardware company, but we're very unique in the way we do things. We do things in such a way that we can get to scale very quickly, get it right the first time, and we make everything in the US. So one of the things, the advantages that we have is by doing everything onshore, we have the ability to control the entire process. Those are big benefits to us. When we scale quickly, and we're working very closely with MachineQ on very large deployments using LoRaWAN, and we're excited about how that's going because the success that we've had in these deployments shows that the scale is really possible. Instead of adding dozens of devices or hundreds of devices, we start adding hundreds of thousands and millions of devices. And really, you start to see the full benefit of IoT in the marketplace. But we're excited to be part of this, and I'll turn it back to you, John.
John, thank you so much. I'd like to turn it over next to Michael Putterman from MachineQ. Michael, as a very close partner with CoreKinect and many others in our ecosystem, would you mind elaborating on, from your perspective, the kind of the value, kind of the core principles that MachineQ orients around fueling that success that John was just describing?
Sure. Before I get into it, just wanted to thank you, John, for moderating the panel and the Alliance, and my co-panel members, John and Tom, for spending time today to go through this. really is an exciting story, and I'm very proud to be here today to tell it. MachineQ, from our very beginning, our mission is really to help solution providers like CoreKinect and enterprises who are looking to deploy IoT solutions. Our mission is to help do that in a simple, easy way. As everybody knows, and we'll get into this in more detail, IoT can be very, very hard. There's a lot of different components, a lot of different players, a lot of different companies and partners out there. And what we've tried to do is make, especially the network aspect of deploying LoRaWAN solutions at scale, really easy. We have an integrated network management platform that companies and customers like CoreKinect use on a daily basis to deploy thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of devices. And we have invested lots of time and resources to make that a best-in-class platform. And again, we're really excited to be here today to talk about that.
Michael, thank you so much. Last but not least, Mr. Tom Patton. Tom, as we hope the audience and the ecosystem sees here, very symbiotic relationship. It goes beyond that. In fact, a partnership. Three legs to this stool here. Each providing an enormous amount of stability and kind of the foundations for success. Tom, as you know, and as maybe the audience does or does not know, MachineQ, powered by the power of Microsoft Azure, the entirety of our platform really kind of has been built on many of the key innovations that Microsoft's brought on the table. Everything from infrastructure to IoT. Tom, would you be so kind to kind of share with us some of your insights as far as that relationship has been, not only with us, but with kind of the broader ecosystem?
Sure, John. Thanks everyone for spending the time with us today. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to work with my fellow panelists today. And yeah, John, you're right. It's been a great journey with the MachineQ team over the last few years, trying to simplify the promise that IoT has to help organizations on their digital transformation journey. And if you kind of see where that's gone, I mean, Microsoft's making big investments over the past 3 or 4 years specifically. We committed a couple of years ago to a $5 billion investment plan over 4 years. We're about midway through that. And the journey that we see this industry taking is really from, as you can see at the bottom of the slide there, really moving from connected assets, so kind of one-off elements, over to connected environments and connected ecosystems. And LoRaWAN is a key component for us, and partners like MachineQ and CoreKinect are key partners to help us realize for our customers that vision around connected ecosystems. Because really to get out there into the real world, out to where things need to be sensed and actuated out in the real world, we need technologies like LoRaWAN to provide that signal, to get that into our cloud where we can really help companies and organizations through our network of partners and capabilities from machine learning to digital twins on their digital transformation journey. So really excited to be here today, and it's been great working with these partners over the last few years.
Tom, thank you so much. Folks, so what we'd like to do now is bring this back to kind of a broad discussion amongst all the panelists here that are with us today. Working from basically our view from left to right, the flow, kind of the journey here, as far as IoT is concerned. So what we'll do here is we'll lead off with a question. John, if you don't mind, I'll kind of initially direct this at you, but I will expect that both Michael and Tom will have very unique perspectives from theirs as well. So, John, not to kind of cite back to something that we've heard you say before, but I think I remember something from you in the past. Hardware doesn't need to be hard, but nonetheless, John, building IoT solutions that add value, that solve real problems, and of course, generate revenue. It's not easy. It's not an easy journey. So to kick this discussion off, John, from your point of view, what from your perspective is so hard about this journey? Can you kind of elaborate further on kind of your journey as it has stood to date, and help us get this conversation started?
Sure, John. And if you look at this chart, you've got all the steps in the process, and we've got all the steps and the players on this call today. So it's exciting to be working together to achieve these goals of what we've done in delivering many devices out there. So let me start with just talking a little bit about the device process. I've been focused on IoT for 20 years, and throughout the course of this time, the single biggest point of failure that I have seen is at the hardware level. You have a lot of companies that have the ability to design, but don't design for manufacture. So these companies will do pilots with 5 devices, and then they go to make them, and they can't scale. They did not design so they can manufacture it easily, efficiently. What they do is we do it efficiently so that we can get to those scales of hundreds of thousands and millions of devices. And we believe that things should be simple. You don't have an Internet of Things without the things, but you've got to make that part easy. It can't be a roadblock, because all it is a means to the end. What you want is the solution and the information at the back end, but you have to have the things and the connectivity that LoRaWAN provides to get there. So we're excited to be part of this process. And as I said before, we're excited to work with MachineQ on this process as well.
John, if you don't mind, I'd like to pull on a brief thread there. Anything unexpected from your point of view, right? So you're a vet here. You understand kind of the pitfalls. Anything that you found that was like, wow, like even for John Horn, that was like interesting. Where we've kind of, I mean, and 1 or 2 observations, if you don't mind.
Well, like I said, I've spent my entire career trying to make things easier in this space. Years ago, when I was at T-Mobile, would say, aren't you worried you're just going to be a dumb pipe? And I'm like, you got to put a lot of work into this to be a dumb pipe. You got to put a lot of work into the hardware to be able to have it simple. You have to put a lot of work in what you do on the front end at MachineQ so that we can make it really easy to go deploy LoRaWAN. One of my most shocking things in this is how easy MachineQ has made this with the gateways. We have literally had pilots where we walked in with our gateway, we showed it to the people, plugged it in, handed them some devices and said, go walk around, your network is running. And they look at us like we're crazy. We're like, no, that's it, we're done. And we have literally had pilots that have lasted just for a few minutes, not days, weeks, or months, because people are shocked with how easy it is. So that was a big one for me. It was exciting to see that and to see the success that comes from truly making things simple.
John, thank you. Tom, if you don't mind, question for you. So, Microsoft's IoT Signals report, table stakes for many people, many customers, looking to begin or evolve their IoT journey and how they're kind of using the same to kind of solve real operational problems, right? They're effectively fueling their digital transformation. Tom, any insights on that you'd like to be able to share, punctuate from that Signals report, and of course, any other context that you believe it would be useful to this audience as far as understanding Microsoft's involvement?
Sure. Yeah. First thing, I would encourage everyone to take a look at the IoT Signals report that Microsoft has commissioned. It's kind of an in-depth view of over 3,000 business decision makers and their opinions and understandings of the challenges in getting to the end game, right? Because as was mentioned before, maybe easy to get 1 device, 2 devices sort of wired up and doing something, but getting this to scale is really hard. And if you look at the top takeaways from the Signals report, and again, there's interesting information in there, not just generic to IoT, but also some very valuable industry-specific information about the challenges that our customers and enterprises in general have faced along the way. So take a look at it. But the thing that rings true through the entire report and the top finding is that the challenge to getting to scale, the challenge to finding success, is a lack of talent and engineering capabilities out there to make it work if you're really taking the approach of putting the pieces and parts together. Right? You've got firmware developers, hardware manufacturers, ISVs, SIs, cloud developers. Bringing this all together is a real challenge. And so our approach at Microsoft has been, number 1, for those things that everyone needs in their IoT projects, try to democratize and make those preset. And then number 2 is to work with strong partners in our ecosystem. And we're working with a variety of partners, across connectivity modalities, across industry domains to pre-build components and make it work. The key thing to scale is if you're spending your project at the beginning, trying to put these pieces together, working on plumbing rather than working on your application layer, it's likely that you run out of steam before you start realizing that business benefit. And that's why we're working with lots of companies around the world, and it's been great to see what we've done with MachineQ to take that plumbing and just make it available to people. So like John mentioned, those prototypes can happen quickly. So I think the key learning here is lots of players involved, a lot of complexity, and the more that we can have pre-baked solutions and let people unleash their talents in the application layer with tools, the closer you can get to scaling these kinds of projects.
Tom, thank you so much. So there's one word that I can't help but to hear, as I kind of unpack kind of your comments, integrated, right? Yeah, I hear integration, the need for things to be integrated. So, Michael, from your perspective, if you could share your views here as far as this journey, if you have any comments around integration and how that's kind of helped us streamline and simplify, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I think to start, just to reiterate the point that Tom made, one of the biggest reasons we see projects fail is because customers are trying to together disparate elements of the IoT solution value chain, as you see depicted on this slide here. It's very, very challenging, and that's probably an understatement, to figure out what device you need to what device is best suited for your particular application. Make sure that firmware is optimized not only for the application you want, but also for scale that can accommodate things like firmware over-the-air updates. Make sure you have the right level of security implemented. You have to deal with a network piece to get the data back to a cloud. Once you have that data in the cloud, how do you use that data, make it valuable for your business? And to do all of those things, as we just mentioned, is very challenging. When customers realize that and rely on partners who have expertise in this particular domain or in a series of domains, I think it makes their project successful. And this coalescence of CoreKinect, MachineQ, and Azure is a perfect example of that, where we have world-class hardware and firmware development pieced with a fully integrated network platform that allows that data to seamlessly travel wirelessly via LoRaWAN and then via, sorry, let me restate that. It allows that data to travel wirelessly via LoRaWAN, and then a cloud-to-cloud integration between MachineQ and the customer's application really allows for a simple solution that not only worked in a pilot here, but worked at scale. We're talking about hundreds of locations, hundreds of thousands of devices.
Michael, thank you. Scale. So as if we were, I was reading your mind, or you were reading mine. So, scale is critical, right? I mean, everybody and anybody who is in the space, today, regardless of the size of your deployments, the goal is scale, to be able to, to deliver and operate at scale, not just for any single customer, but multiple customers. As I'm sure, Tom would agree, John, and you and Michael as well, scale's not free. Sometimes scale is, unfortunately, an afterthought. One of the things that I think, Tom, that I'll kind of turn this over to you to kind of get us started here is, given Azure's, and Microsoft's long-standing history in this space, if you look at the kind of the vintage and just the kind of the history of data that you'll find in things like the IoT Signals report, Microsoft on probably a daily basis is interacting with folks at every aspect of their journey when it comes to IoT, startups, small companies, early stage, all the way through to folks who've kind of, shot through and have now kind of are operating at scale. Any insights there, Tom, as far as what from your seat, some critical considerations that folks should have top of mind as far as looking ahead to scale, even if you're starting off small here and now today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we talk about scale, like a lot of times we're having engineering conversations. We're talking about peak loads and trying to manage for those peak loads. but I'd like to bring a different angle in, because another important part of finding success at scale is the economics of your solution and the cost model that you're going on. So lots of times, something may be very hard to achieve profitability or a return on your investment until you're at scale. So finding systems that allow you to kind of smoothly ramp up, right? So that, like, as you have tens or hundreds of devices, that you're able to have a return on an investment that's, similar, maybe not as efficient as when you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of devices. And that's why we've tried to have partnerships and offerings like our IoT Central offering, or like the MachineQ offering, where that cost model is predictable and scalable. So I think it's great to talk about peak loads and understand how to scale out your architecture in the cloud, and many other things that I'm sure our other panelists will comment about. But I think it's really important at the outset of projects to think about that cost model and how you can start returning a positive ROI early in your project. Otherwise, you'll never make it to scale in the long run if you're not able to show value early in the project.
Thank you, Tom. John Horn, on the front lines, talking to the customers. Your team is facilitating, obviously in cooperation with others, but really kind of, having the rubber meet the road. Perspectives on scale, if you don't mind, and honestly, even if you have stories that you can point back to from kind of the early days when things were just getting, the party was just getting started at CoreKinect.
I thought you were going to say, as the party was getting started back in the ancient days of IoT and M2M before that. So I have been around a while. I've seen a lot, and I appreciated Tom's comments on the basically scale and ROI and costs, because really that is the key foundation. In the early days of this industry, you had things like fleets and other solutions that were easy to get an ROI. The challenge that's going to get us to billions of devices and a trillion devices down the road and all these things connected is really the ROI aspect of it. And that's where LoRaWAN comes in and becomes a critical piece. You got the three-legged stool of which you mentioned already. You've got hardware, software, and connectivity. Each one of those has a cost. And as those can come down, then great things can happen, and you can get into all sorts of areas that we could never penetrate before because it was just too expensive. And so we're seeing here what we do on our side, on the manufacturing side. Like I said, we make everything in the US, right here in Arizona. I'm in Arizona right now, and we're able to do that competitive with offshore by the way we design the product for manufacturing. So if we can design the product so it can be made quickly, easily, and efficiently, then you get your costs down, you can make it here, and you can get it out to market at a price point that's super competitive. So what we have seen using LoRaWAN, with the savings that come from not having large monthly recurring costs for cellular or satellite or other solutions, what we're seeing is ROI numbers that are absolutely incredible. We have built products with a 10-year life cycle that have ROI of 4 months. So 120-month life cycle, and it pays for itself completely in 4 months. That's ROI. So we're excited to see what happens when you bring all these different parts together and do it in a very efficient way.
John, that's staggering. 4 months is unbelievable. I mean, I think if there's one thing that I think is important for this audience and this ecosystem to hear is, that's needle moving, right? Thank you for that. Michael Putterman, scaling a platform certainly has no shortage of challenges. Certainly have complimentary reviews from John here, and as well as Tom. Your perspectives on scaling a platform and many of the nuances that you've heard here from your fellow panelists.
Sure. I think I'll focus, because I think both Tom and John really did well with the message on ROI and business case. I'll focus sort of on some of the implementation challenges that we face and that customers face when we're really trying to scale, and some of the things that you might want to look out for. We find that more than anything, what precludes successfully scaling is a lack of planning and a lack of testing, really. And so if I start with the former, when you're in a pilot mode, and let's say you have 100 devices, 1,000 devices, maybe you're working in a few sites, it's really easy to make sacrifices to get that POC or that pilot done. You can build a workaround that, let's say it takes an extra minute or an extra 30 seconds, per device that you're adding or per location that you're adding. Well, when you go from 100 devices to 200,000 devices, an extra minute equates to 3,000 hours plus of work, which the average person works 2,000 hours a year. You now just added a full year of someone's time to accommodate that workaround that you thought made sense for your pre-scale deployment. And so as you're going through, from a pilot or again a pre-scale situation to a post, you really have to make sure that you're going to have these situations where you have workarounds, but you have to think of a way to knock as many of those out as possible, because when you get to that point when the customer says, all right, let's go, put the pedal to the metal, you're going to blow out the ROI, or the implementation will become too complex to actually be implementable. And so I think that's something that we've certainly found. And those things can range anything from provisioning a device to putting a physical label on a device, or a number of behaviors or actions that you take during the real world deployment of a solution. The second piece of that is what I referenced earlier on end-to-end testing. We think it's really critical that you test the exact full end-to-end implementation that you will be deploying. We've seen oftentimes that you'll test the exact network and cloud implementation and the right hardware, but a different firmware version. And when you get to full scale, there's an updated firmware version, and it throws a wrench in the entire deployment. And so I think planning, making sure you give yourself enough time as a customer or as an implementer to really make sure you have all those final versions of each component of the stack done, we find is really important to make sure you plan properly and result in a successful scaled deployment.
Michael, thank you. On the topic of scale, moving on, and I think to a topic that I believe will resonate deeply with the LoRa Alliance as it pertains to LoRaWAN. I think everybody on this call, on this panel, has had their share of debates and discussions around different wireless technology. One of the things that I think would be important for this ecosystem, for this audience to hear, is stories from the field where success has been realized at the hands of LoRaWAN, right? So one of the things, and I think John, if you don't mind, I'll start off with you on this one. When we often have these conversations around LoRaWAN and as it pertains to other kind of wireless technologies, we absolutely believe that there's a complementary nature to all of them, right? Everything doesn't really need to be a competition, right? I mean, there is a world where many things can coexist, it's just solving different problems with different tools. LoRaWAN in particular, John, if you look at how you've adopted it, could you elaborate? Would you mind kind of sharing your thought process around your considerations around LoRaWAN, the things that you've seen in the field as far as the almost a TCO around how efficient LoRaWAN is from both a power perspective, distance, and range. We'd love to get your perspective, pragmatically speaking, on how that's fueled benefit and ultimately power for you as far as solving your customers' problems.
Yeah, it's really exciting when you look at this and what LoRaWAN brings to the table. And we are connectivity agnostic, okay? We want the best connectivity for the solution that accomplishes the goal of the end user, the customer, right? So there's places where satellite's best, cellular, Cat M1, LoRa, Bluetooth. There's room for everything. However, LoRaWAN has a unique advantage on the ROI, total cost of ownership, part of that, because you're dramatically reducing that monthly operational cost. And when you have product life cycles like we have, those really add up. As Miles mentioned about just adding a few seconds here, there, a few minutes here, there, what does that end up being? It means a lot, right? So it's the same thing when you're deploying hundreds of thousands and millions of these. A few cents, a dollar, whatever, a month per device is a massive, massive difference. So it's really, really important that people pick the right technology to meet their needs. And LoRaWAN is great in the environments where we use it. And we have solutions that use 4 or 5 different connectivity technologies all as part of it. But where we do a lot in the automotive space and asset tracking and so forth, we love LoRaWAN because the power management is fantastic. Like I said, we can get 10 years out of a device. The coverage is fantastic. We've seen 70 miles of coverage, which blew me away. It was exciting to see because everybody talks about, oh, it doesn't go very far. No, actually, if it wasn't for the curvature of the earth, it goes forever. So we've seen great success with it. And so from a power side to a coverage side to a cost side, LoRaWAN is a definite winner.
John, thank you. I can't help but to ask Michael, any additional thoughts that you'd like to offer here on that? I mean, I think John queued it up nicely, but I think there's perhaps you've got some very specific views on kind of the scalability of LoRaWAN as a wireless networking media.
Sure, of course. I like to think about it, and we at MachineQ like to think about LoRa in sort of along two different dimensions. Number one is you have the technological attributes of the wireless connectivity standard. You have its amazing propagation, as John just mentioned. You have the fact that it's very low cost to deploy. You have the fact that you can accommodate tens of thousands of devices for a single gateway. All these things really make the technology very powerful. And even perhaps in a lot of the use cases that I've talked about and that we're talking about here today with outdoor asset tracking are outdoor, but we find that even indoors, the technology is maybe even more impressive because you have the ability to cover an entire warehouse or an entire residential or commercial property for a very, very cost disruptive price point. And so for all those reasons, the technology is great. But I think one thing that often gets overshadowed is actually the business model that's associated with the technology. Many network standards don't allow customers to own the network, let's say, or to decide how they want to interact with it. In the LoRa world, you can interact in either a public network setting or a private network setting. And I think that flexibility really appeals to customers who, and potentially in other connectivity standards, they might only have one choice or the other. So I think for both of those reasons, we really see technology being adopted more rapidly than ever before, here in the United States.
Thanks, Michael. Tom, briefly from your perspective, I mean, as you can, as we've all discussed here throughout our journey together, lots of great work here being done as part of the Alliance. LoRaWAN is, top of mind here. Love to get your perspective on kind of, compare and contrast, what you're seeing from Azure's IoT lens around kind of, differences as far as, media is concerned. Effectively, Tom, some commentary around kind of the right hammer for the right nail, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, John, certainly we see the right tool for the right component of your solution as an important consideration here. I mean, if you look at some of the places where LoRaWAN technology plays really well in some of the customer journeys that we've been on, say quick serve restaurants or monitoring campuses or commercial building environments or even retail settings. Those sensors, being able to optimize their battery and only maintain them, only be able to service them 10 years instead of every 4 years or something like this is a huge operational cost savings. But when you're looking at that project all up, there's lots of other components. So if you're in your retail environment and all of a sudden the requirement is to manage dwell time and understand where people are waiting and what decisions they're making, and you start bringing in high bandwidth requirements and cameras and edge compute and other components into your overall IoT solution, it's important to have a platform that brings this together so that LoRaWAN and things running over your Wi-Fi network or wired devices or other communication protocols can come together and be managed holistically. So LoRaWAN, huge important component of the toolbox that's required for these digital transformation projects, but important to keep the broader picture in mind for device management and monitoring, so that you can bring all of those different components, regardless of their connectivity requirements, into a single place and understand them, reason about them, and operate, run them operationally at an easy way.
Thank you, Tom. I know scale, simplification, streamlining is near and dear to everybody's heart on this panel. One last question that I'll pose to Michael Putterman, and then we'll move into some final topics here. Michael, as from MachineQ point of view, leading the development and the operational side of a IoT platform, could you kind of at a very high macro level share some insight around things like growth that you've seen from payload, device onboarding perspective, and then further, like any highlights around like ratios, right? So how when it comes to number of devices that you see per gateway, I think that would help highlight for the audience kind of further or punctuate further the power of LoRaWAN and of course the platform that that MachineQ brings to the table.
Sure. I think over the last year or so, we've started to see some tremendous growth and momentum in the market. If you compare, where we are today to where we were 12 months ago, we're looking, on the order of 10 times larger today than we were 12 months ago. And to keep up with that type of growth over the course of the year, and we don't see that growth slowing down. So, we estimate another 5 to 10x growth this year, and so we're looking at 50 to 100 times more packets through our system, more devices on the network, et cetera, as we had 2 years ago. We're gonna have to keep up that investment in the platform, and so far it's met the task completely. With respect to some of the specific ratios, John, that you asked about, a lot of customers, and it's perfectly okay for them, they might have 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, few hundred devices for a gateway. But we do have other customers that might have 5,000, 10,000 devices that are connecting through a single LoRaWAN gateway. And in that network, we might see 98, 99% packet throughput. So I think the technology has been engineered in such a way that you can certainly put a lot of volume through gateways with high reliability, and that fundamentally helps to engender and enable the type of scale deployments that we're talking about here today.
So powerful. I mean, those growth figures are staggering, Michael. That's phenomenal. So scale. Last topic, kind of related to scale, right? So installation services. For those of us who've kind of been in cable or broadband for a long time, like it's the heart and soul of taking internet to millions of people. I'll start this one off with John Horn, but I'll certainly ask Michael and Tom for your perspectives as well. Being able to facilitate the installation of these gateways, even though the ratio is perhaps much smaller than that of other wireless technologies. John, could you elaborate for us, how valuable that's been to you? Like what's the logistics around being able to make sure that gateways, our your solution and all the corresponding components to it are being installed in a timely manner. Some color there would be, I think, would be very useful for the audience here.
Sure. The great thing about this is we're not talking about theory here. We're talking about practical application and what we've achieved, right, by working together. MachineQ has done an extraordinary job of, again, as I said earlier, making this simple, but also having all the resources available so we can deploy at a scale, not only number-wise, but geographically, and get all the things done we need to do. I mean, there was a week a few months back where we deployed into 8 locations in 6 states and then deployed thousands of devices per each one of those locations. So you've got the gateway installs being done by MachineQ, you have hardware coming in and being shipped from us, you have all the integration and implementation of all those moving parts. But there's not too many companies that can do what MachineQ did and do it effectively, where they can go out to very diverse locations and quickly deploy. That's how Michael's getting to those numbers, talking about, you know, 10-fold increase. You can't get there unless you can get to these very, very large scale numbers. And so we have seen that success operationally, and everybody wins when it goes like that. Because when things go bad, everybody starts pointing fingers, people get frustrated very quickly. We've not had that experience at all. We've had major success and very satisfied customers.
Michael, thoughts on the delivery end of that?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure, and we've been very excited to partner with John and the CoreKinect team on these deployments. Just taking a step back, a lot of at least my exposure in IoT over the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a lot of talk because of the maturity of the ecosystem on solutions and product development and getting that right, making sure the devices work, making sure the software works, and all those. All of that is very needed, very important. But if you can't deploy what you've created, it becomes problematic for you and for the customers. And so over the last few years, we've really invested in training a distributed network of technicians to be able to go out there and put IoT solutions in the ground. And what that has meant is it's unlocked the numbers and the scale that we're talking about today, because if you have deployments that are distributed throughout the United States, as John just mentioned, 8 states in a week, 7 states in a week, to various countries throughout the world, coordinating that, and just the act of actually deploying it, lighting up sensors, putting them on things, putting gateways in the ground, deploying networks, it's very challenging. And to have a way to do that in a distributed way and in an organized way that almost guarantees success has been really powerful for the story of the scaled solution that we're talking about today with Microsoft and CoreKinect.
Thanks, Michael. Mr. Patton, your universe of people that you interact with, and we can only imagine how vast that is. Love your perspective on on kind of the uniqueness of kind of the installation, the uniqueness, and most importantly, the criticality of those installation services as far as kind of making those dreams a reality.
I mean, I think IoT is that place where the IT folks and the digital transformation journey people meet the operational technology folks, right? And you can dream big and you can stay up late eating pizza and build your systems and do all this stuff. And so if your project originates from a digital transformation world and you're not considering the realities of having the right partners with the tool belts and the bucket trucks and the tools, right, to go out there in the environment and establish those sensors, those actuators that enable your digital twins, that build it, you're overlooking a very serious component of the solution. So I think that's one of the challenges that we started off talking about, right? All the different kinds of players involved and the different kind of competencies that the different players bring to the table. So certainly that early planning and that understanding and that getting past, I hooked up 3 things and it works and yay, now I might be able to scale, my ML algorithms or my database. I know how to do this, but how do I take those 3 devices and make it into 300,000 around the country? Super critical to think about for success. So it's great to have partners in play to complement sort of what we're doing on the cloud side to be able to make that a reality for our customers.
John Horn, last thought on this topic. Could you offer us a one-liner or 2 around how this truly impacts your ROI and your ability to deliver value to your customers?
Again, we believe things should be simple. The combination of the players on this call today come together to make it as simple as absolutely possible. I don't think we can make it any easier than we have done. And that's going to deliver great results and success, not only for us, but for all of the people that are looking for the solutions and the answers that comes out of the data.
John, thank you. So one of the, as we kind of move towards wrapping up here, one of the things that I'll kind of move towards here is we have, you know, as I hope the kind of the audience and ecosystem hears here, like very symbiotic relationship between, you know, all the panelists here today. Every piece represents a critical component to success. Tom, I'm actually gonna point the last, you know, kind of the wrap up here to you. You know, as we look at how each of these players, you all interact with one another. When you take a step back, what, you know, how does this, you know, do relationship like these, you know, fuel the efforts for Azure internally when it comes to IoT? You know, as far as, you know, if not just leveraging existing, but also kind of fueling kind of the creation of new things that continue to kind of juice this streamlined, simplified theme that I think I hope everybody's taken away from this discussion today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a high level, you know, we have these great visions. We have these great technology infrastructures. We have Azure Digital Twins that can take all of these sensors and components in the environment and relate them in a way that makes sense, so that it's not, you know, 100,000 devices, but rather it's an environment with those devices related to one another that makes sense. So that's great, but without, you know, and I love the phrase, because we've been saying with the MachineQ team, there's no Internet of Things without the internet. And I like John's, there's no Internet of Things without the things, right? So it takes all three, right? It takes those software platforms that can enable you to move from thinking about things as things and devices into things like conference rooms and boilers and, you know, refrigerators and how they relate to one another so that you can build applications. So I think we've assembled an interesting panel here because it kind of hits all three of those areas. And I think to the audience listening, you know, make sure that whatever your bias is, we all have a bias, we all have a core competency that we're working with in your teams as you're planning your projects, that you think of all three legs of the stool that's kind of been brought up a couple of times, and make sure you've got a plan and a partnership that can help you deliver the projects that your ambitions have.
Thank you. With that, folks, John Horn from CoreKinect, Michael Putterman from MachineQ, Tom Patton from Azure IoT. We cannot thank you enough for your contribution today. Huge, enormous thanks to the LoRa Alliance for the gracious opportunity to participate here and really share what we feel are relevant stories and experiences from, you know, making IoT dreams a reality. With that, I'd like to turn it over to field some questions from the audience. Thank you. Once again, folks, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Such a healthy slate of questions to ask here from everybody who was generous enough to attend with us here today. I'd like to, John Horn, lead off with a question for you. Seems very appropriate, you know, given the kind of the nature of the conversation that we've had here. We had a question from Keith Hill in the audience. You know, could you give us an example of a hardware product that's had a 4-month ROI? I think this is right up your alley, John. We'd love to get your perspective here on this particular question.
It's a great question, John. A good question to start with. So let me back up one step here and just talk about, we get the hardware done in the US efficiently and competitively by taking the human element out as much as possible. Machines are machines, whether they're here or in Asia. How much human touch is what makes the difference. Most IoT solutions, including the one with the 4-month ROI, did the same thing. Very, very few human touch points where there used to be literally hundreds of human touch points. So you take the solution where you're trying to manage your car inventory, for instance, and everybody that's gone to buy a car has had this experience where they can't find the darn car, right? So if you can take it where you know exactly where all your inventory is all the time, and you can find those products much more quickly, sell them more efficiently, do it with less headcount, and that product that you just bought that allows you to do that, again, as I mentioned earlier, has a 10-year life cycle. and you don't have to recharge it or do anything in that 10 years. And you have the efficiency of LoRaWAN from a cost perspective. A lot of these solutions do not work with cellular. That monthly MRC on LTE or Cat-M1 or whatever it happens to be becomes very, very expensive across hundreds of thousands and millions of devices or vehicles in this particular scenario. So by having those efficiencies and not having that monthly MRC, your OpEx is less, your initial CapEx is less, and within a matter of 4 months, these companies that use this solution were able to pay for the entire onset cost of the CapEx of the devices and the small recurring charge of the LoRa gateway, the LoRaWAN gateway they're getting from MachineQ versus having a cellular network cost. So that's how they get there.
John, thank you so much. Your response there also happened to cover another question from our friend Keith in the audience as well. Another question I think is extremely would be very insightful for the audience here. You've been on quite the journey here. Not only with us but for many years now. What's been the most unexpected lesson learned from your point of view scaling IoT with CoreKinect and its customers?
Well, I like to say it takes a lot of work to make things simple, and we've done a lot of work on the front end at CoreKinect, and you guys have done a lot of work at MachineQ on the gateways and the systems and everything. And when you do it right, the deployment really does become simple. And we talk about it all the time, and I said at the beginning of this webcast, we're not talking about theory here. We're talking about practical application and actually deploying these things and seeing it, and have it be even easier than we expected is a bit shocking. Again, so many companies cannot scale at these kinds of numbers, and us working together, we've been able to do this very, very well. And have it be even easier than I expected was a big shock to me.
John, thank you once again. I'd like to shift over to Tom Patton from Microsoft. Tom, question from Aaron in the audience from today. For the integrations aspect, what are the top 3 selling points from a Microsoft point of view for people who are trying to make that decision between between Azure and an AWS? Anything you could share with us there from your seat?
Sure, happy to talk a little bit about some of the competitive differentiators that I think we have at Microsoft. And to break it down into 3 areas, I think the first one is really we approach the market, as a partnership, as a partner and platform company, and we've had that partner network. This sort of it takes a village in IoT is certainly a recurring theme that you hear about. So in terms of having the solution providers and systems integrators globally and our global footprint is one of those differentiators, I'd say. The next is when you get to the IoT platform and kind of look above the data ingestion at some of the areas where this theme of simplifying things and pre-building the common components, really takes hold. So I think our IoT Central application framework can really accelerate your time to solution for IoT projects. And then our work in digital twins gives you a good landscape, again, like I mentioned in the talk, of taking the sensors and the actuators in the environment and making sense of them. And then the third thing is, it's not just about the device management, state management, firmware upgrades, et cetera, that we think about sort of in the IoT and communications space, but it's how you get to that complete application. And Microsoft is unique in terms of the hyperscale cloud providers in that we have an array of technologies like our Power Platform and Power BI and our Dynamics offerings that complement IoT to really bring those technologies together and form solutions. So that third area of the pre-integration between application platforms, low-code, no-code environments, like Power Apps and Power BI, and the IoT framework is a third one I'd point out.
Thanks, Tom. Tom, one other question for you here before we go into kind of the final kind of series of questions here. Microsoft is clearly a powerhouse in the IT space. So many products and services. As you were alluding to a moment ago, many of which are IoT oriented. I think the audience would love to hear from you. Many of those scenarios are media specific. We've seen work done by Microsoft and IoT around Wi-Fi. Anything you could elaborate on for the audience's benefit around what specific plans Microsoft might have for LoRaWAN?
Sure. So we're always looking to our customers and partners to understand where the trade-offs are between doing work organically in organizations, using partner solutions, using first-party capabilities from Microsoft. And right now, we've got partnerships across all different kinds of connectivity modes, not just LoRaWAN, but in each of them, what we find out when we go with a global telecom operator or an MVNO or a company like MachineQ that has that specialized knowledge about how to juice the battery so that it gets the top amount of life and manage the networks effectively. We want to partner with all of these companies and bring them together into that common platform like IoT Central, our IoT Hub offering, so that the cloud developer, the solution developers that are building, using those tools that I mentioned before, really have a common surface that they can think about those devices in a connectivity agnostic way, where we have partners, like MachineQ and others in the LoRaWAN space and across different connectivity modalities, kind of snapping to those standards that we're providing and working with them, things like Azure Plug and Play to make sure that there's uniformity in the way that we address those devices, and again, the IoT Central and Hub offerings that we have that unify those devices regardless of their sort of connectivity mode.
Thanks so much, Tom. We, if there are follow-up questions that we have here from the audience, we'll be sure to circle back across all the panelists here. Last but not least, Michael Putterman. Intriguing question from the audience today. The inquiry here is, what sort of indoor applications, are we seeing? Not only from MachineQ perspective, but also from an ecosystem industry perspective. Could you elaborate on this for us?
Sure, happy to. It's a great question. One of the interesting things, I think, in the early days of LoRaWAN, a lot of the applications that we saw and that we helped solution providers serve were primarily outdoor, but that's really evolved over the last few years. And I think today, we see probably just as much momentum on indoor use cases as we do outdoor. And just specifically, for the audience, if there's interest, I think it ranges from everything from leak detection for water damage or water use cases to different elements of temperature monitoring for appliances or just ambient air monitoring, things like air quality for return to office scenarios post-COVID, actually tracking of assets indoors, energy management in terms of consumption for HVAC systems and other types of building systems. So the list really is diverse and long, and we have, as I mentioned when I first started speaking, that a lot of momentum, a lot of customers, a lot of providers that are focused on deploying these solutions and LoRa in indoor settings. I mentioned this on the webcast, but one learning that we've had specifically is that the technology is immensely powerful in indoor settings because of its propagation. And so with very little capital investment, gateway or two, you can cover 50, 100,000 square foot building, and that building is now ready for action, and you can connect any device that you want to solve your problem in that facility.
Michael, thank you so much. I think much of that is important for folks, not only in the audience, especially for people who may be new to LoRaWAN, to understand the true power behind the technology and the true power that this trio brings to the table as far as solving real problems and kind of building solutions for real use cases. Folks, John Horn from CoreKinect, Michael Putterman from MachineQ, Tom Patton from Azure IoT, cannot thank you enough for your time and contributions today. Folks in the audience, again, we apologize. We did not have enough time to answer all the intriguing questions that we had from you all. We'll work with the Alliance to make sure that we kind of follow up appropriately with you all. Once again, thank you very much and have a nice day.